filmmaker. If I wanted to be a writer, I'd be a novelist. If I wanted to write dialogue, I'd be a playwright. But I want to make films. I'm a filmmaker. I'm no different than a costume designer, a DOP, a director. I make movies for a living. It's easy to become cynical about a lot of things in Hollywood or show business or the movie business, wherever you do it, London or LA, wherever it's going on. But I think when you become cynical about what you're doing as well, it's not good and it shows up quick. And so I think the trick is to not become cynical about the work itself. And the best way to do that is just to try to do work that engages you and stimulates you. I've written 60-odd screenplays, 18 of which have been made into films, and 3 television shows. And so I must know something. And I didn't know what I knew, so when I agreed to do this, I sat down and tried to analyze what I think I could pass on. I think the first thing is pick something worth writing about, which seems fairly obvious. You want to make it compelling and you want to make it commercial. And the thing about a commercial movie is all it has to do is make more money than it costs to make. So if your movie costs $10 to make and it makes $20, it's commercial. The thing is a movie, when it's just a screenplay, and you can plan, and you can know some of the locations and been to them, but it's theoretical. And when you start making it, it becomes practical, brutally practical. You know, there's not enough money for what you wrote. There's not, the way the schedule lines up, we need to find a different location, and now it's outside instead of inside, which could potentially change a lot of things. So you have to be willing to know, you have to know that you get it to a certain point, and hopefully you're the person that gets it to the next point as well, but it then has to become a reality that is much trickier than just sitting at home by yourself, typing away and making it what you want it to be. Screenwriters have to fight, and you have to fight with everybody. You have to fight. If someone looks at you the wrong way, you have to fight. You can't be happy to be in meetings. You can't feel grateful. You can't have any of that stuff. So you have to never apologize for being a writer. You have to fight. You have to absolutely be known as difficult. Executives should dread when they see that you're coming in. And they should dread that you're coming in because you should make them feel stupid. And you get away with this by being good at what you do. So be good and embarrass them and never give an inch to them.
Now, one of the things that you take your place in history is that you're one of the very few people to have won a Razzie and an Oscar at the same time.
I got hired on The Postman by Ron Howard to write it for Tom Hanks. Yeah. It was a movie I couldn't get fired from. Usually a writer can manage to get fired from a movie, but I couldn't get fired from that movie. But I won the Razzie for Worst Screenplay that year as at the same time I won the Academy Award for LA Confidential, and I won the Razzie on Saturday, and I won the Oscar on Sunday. You know, if you really want to make a great film, you have to take the risk that you're going to make a really bad film. If you make a safe film, it's never going to be too bad or too good. But that's why I like the Razzie, because that movie could have been great. It's not, but it could have been.
But you think it's actually quite close to, I mean, you think there's
Yeah, there was.
What was the key?
The key thing was, you'd have to see it, which I don't recommend, but the Kevin Costner character in my script was a con man, and it was post-apocalyptic in these little towns and he would show up he had found a dead body with a postman's uniform on it, and he wore it, yeah. And he said the government's been reformed, they're delivering the mail again, can you give me something to eat, can I sleep with one of the girls here? And it was a scam to get fed and entertain people. And it became a movement And the only person who didn't believe in it was him. And so it's basically, he basically said, you know, it's pretty unsympathetic that I don't believe in this. And I said, yeah, but you do at the end. You take the reins, and he said, no, I think I should be sincere. And that's where the whole, it's like if Burt Lancaster in The Rainmaker really thought he could make it rain, it wouldn't be quite as good. So that's where it went wrong. I think there's something strange about writing a script, that no matter how, I've written many, many scripts, dozens and dozens of scripts, and every time I start one, I think to myself, why in the world do I think I know how to do this? In a way, I mean, I know I'm going to be able to do it, but each time I start one, I think, oh boy, this is the one I'm not going to be able to write, and how am I going to do this, and I have to always go, there's never a shortcut, I never learn enough to make it easier, and each one is usually this kind of creative journey as far as trying to write it. There's no such thing as writer's block. It's the price you pay for the good day you had on Thursday. And you do more work sitting staring at the wall than you do ever feeling it and writing stuff out and fingers flying across the keyboard. And if you're unwilling to go through the pain of that, then you will not get the reward on the other side. You'd think I'd have a big bag of tricks to fall back on, but I really don't feel like I do. And I think it's that each one brings its own trouble and satisfaction is what keeps it going. What I think I realized in my own work is I'm interested in identity. And that can be discovering who you are, sticking to who you are, returning to who you are, or realizing that you can't get away from who you are. A film critic in the States, Elvis Mitchell, interviewed me once, and he started to ask me that question, if I had a theme, and I said no, and he said, yeah, but you do. And I said, no, I don't. And he said, it's identity. And he explained, he listed about 5 of the movies I had done and said, that's about identity, and that's about identity. And for example, Payback is a guy who is trying to get himself back on track. He's been double-crossed, and he didn't see it coming, and he's trying to make his world right again and make himself right again if he can just get his $70,000 back. Which is a little bit of kind of an identity story.
Who the hell are you?
I'm Porter.
Well, Porter, that looks like assault to me.
Porter looks to me like the kind that likes to resist arrest.
Hey! Fuck, no, not in here. Jesus, guys, he wants to talk. Am I right? Did I call it?
You know, movie dialogue has never been how people really talk. It's not supposed to be how people really talk. It's how we wish people talked. It's what you wish you said to somebody when they insulted you. It's what you wish you had said in a romantic situation. But it's not, when people say it doesn't sound the way people really talk, of course it doesn't. It's movie dialogue. It's never, people talk like I'm talking right now in real life. So I think the trick to dialogue is that it's about rhythm. You want to say it out loud. You want to say it often. You want to repeat it over and over again. And above all, you want to shorten it. So I actually play a game with myself where if I have 10 lines of dialogue, I say it has to be 7 lines. I don't know how I'm going to make it 7 lines, but it has to be 7 lines. And then I work at it, and it sometimes can take an hour just to fiddle with it. It's not as good. It's 7 lines, but it's not as good. And this reduction of dialogue is what makes great movie dialogue. The best actors want less of it, and so give it to them.
Now, where'd you meet up with my delivery boy?
At his drop.
Is he dead?
No, but she is OD'd on that crap you've been sending her.
So? What do you care?
I'm her husband.
You're not gonna kill me, are you?
Not in front of these kids. Where is he?
I don't know. That's the truth. You see, this stuff gets delivered to me too, you know, last night. And I won't see anyone again till next month.
Why all the trouble?
Well, he's afraid of the girl, you know. I mean, of Mrs. Porter. I mean, that's how it looks to me.
My favorite scripts are some that haven't been made, and they're more difficult movies, and they're harder. They're less commercial, and they're less accessible, readily accessible, and they're movies that the studios would make if they had a movie star, but they're not movies that they would make cash offers to actors and that kind of things.
Working with Clint Eastwood, and Clint Eastwood assessing a piece of work by how much it weighed.
Right. I wrote a script for him called Blood Work, and I brought it to his office when I was all done, and it was the shortest script I ever wrote. It was 95 pages. And I went into his office and gave it to him, and he took it, and he just went like that with it. He went, "How many pages is this?" And I said, 95. And he said, "It's already the best script I ever read in my life." So there was that one. And the other one was, he sent me the book from Mystic River. And I read it, and I was prepping a movie that I was going to direct. I didn't have time, but it's him. So I read it. And I had a bunch of little, no, not a bunch, I had 2 little boys at the time, and I just didn't want to make a movie about that. I just didn't want to have, and it was from where it was based on a kind of my own neighborhood back home, and I just said, no, I don't want to do it. And, but I passed to his agent, so I didn't have to tell him directly. And his agent said, "Is that your final answer?" Like it's a quiz show. And I said, that's my final answer. He goes, "Okay, I'll tell him." Click. And it was a Sunday. And an hour later, the phone rang, and it's Eastwood. And he says, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Well, I live out," so, you know, I told him where I live. And it's far away from where he lives, an hour. And he goes, "Well, I feel like taking a drive. I want to come out and see you." Like, unheard of. And I said, no, look, wherever you are, I'll come see you. I'll come talk about the book. And he's like, no, I'll be there this afternoon sometime. So I wait and I wait and I wait. And then finally the doorbell rings. And this is almost how long the entire meeting lasted. I opened the door and he said, "Hi," and he walked in and he looked around the house. And he said, "Do you got a yard?" And I said, "Yeah, I got a yard." And I walked him to the back door and opened there's a sliding glass door, and I opened it, and he looked out, and he went, "Oh, that's good." And I said, "Do you want anything to drink?" And he said, No. I go, and we had some cookies. And I said, "You want a cookie?" And he said, "What kind are they?" And I said, "They're oatmeal." And he went over and looked at them. He went, "Oh, yeah, I'll have one." And I got a plate. And he goes, "I don't need a plate." And he picked the cookie up, and he went over to the sink. And he just started eating the cookie over the sink. And I'd been around him on the other movie, so I knew that you just don't, many times no one talks for 10 minutes. So I just sat down at the kitchen table, kind of wondering why was this happening? And he's knocking the crumbs into the sink and eating and looking out the window. And finally he's done, and he goes like this. And he looked, but he didn't look at me, and he just kind of looked in my direction, and he went, "So, are you going to do the book?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I'm going to do the book." and he went, "Oh, great. When do you think you'll have it done?" I said, 4 months. And he went, "Great." And he walked out the door, and the next time I saw him, I was handing him the script. So.
Hey, you.
Hey there.
I'm going out tonight with Eve and Diane at 7:30.
Okay, don't stay out too late. You got your sister's first communion tomorrow. Yeah. Christ, I sound like...
Someone's father.
Yeah, somebody's, not mine.
Later, Daddy.
Later. Have fun.
Later.
I worked with a lot of directors multiple times, have got on with them really well. The best directors don't mind if you fight with them and argue with them. They're happy as a way to examine the story, and not just be agreed with and that kind of thing. And then the directors that you don't get along with, you just don't work with them again. If you are a writer, there's a lot made of sort of this adversarial relationship between directors and writers, which I don't believe in personally. And I've had a lot of luck with 4 different directors I've worked with more than once. And you need them, and they need you, kind of lost without each other. And a secure director really wants to hear what you have to say, whether he agrees with you or not, or she. And the kind of more push and pull and tug there is between you, the better the film will probably be. Directors can be your greatest ally. I was once called by Paul Greengrass out of the blue. I didn't know Paul. And I got a phone call one day. Paul wants to talk to you. And I said yes. And he was doing the Bourne Supremacy. And he was in Berlin, and he said, he got right to the point. He said he had picked me off a list, looked at my credits. They had promised him that he could have a rewrite of the script before he started shooting. And they had put him off, and finally he demanded. He said, you promised, and now I want someone to come in. And I still to this day don't know how he got my name, but he called me. So he said, can you come out to Berlin? And we start shooting in a week. And it was a lark. And he sent me the script. I read it on the plane going over. And I got there, and he was kind of exhausted. Not physically, I think he was just exhausted from prepping and prepping at a studio and having to deal with all the politics, which he had a different version of, but not quite the same version of. And we had a beer, and he kind of was laughing, and he said, I wanted to redo the entire script, and now there isn't time. And I said, well, when did you start shooting? And it was by that point 5 days. And I said, we have time. We can rewrite the entire script. And he perked right up, and he said, do you think so? And I said, yeah. And I think we stood up basically 4 days and rewrote from start to finish the entire movie. And that's what a writer and a director, when they get on, do with each other. If there was a fire burning and all my negatives of all my films were about to go up in flames, and I could go in and save one of them, it would be Man on Fire, because it's easily my favorite film for many reasons. Just for the part of it is the story, and part of it is the making of it, and part of it is the finished product. I think is really excellent.
When you were a kid, Creasy, did you like school?
I don't remember.
You don't remember?
No, I don't remember. No, I didn't like it.
Why not?
Because it wasn't a school like yours, Peter. There was no Sister Anna.
Were you unhappy?
Being unhappy, Peter, that's a state of mind. I really don't remember.
To me, it's Tony's best film, along with True Romance. And his style that he shot that film in is so perfect for the characters and what's going on in their heads and hearts and all that kind of thing. And I think it was a perfect combination of what was on the page and what the director brought to it and what the actors brought to it. And everyone every day kind of game to make it the best movie we could make.
What happened to your hand?
It's a birth defect.
No, it's not.
Look, no more questions, okay?
In the movie, she's enamored with him, and he is with her as well. But at some point, you have to get out of that scene and have a point to it. And they could keep on talking and talk this through, but it just seemed like he drives or she's trying to sit up front with him. Minor thing, that's not earth-shattering, but the car stops and she gets in the back seat, so we're not going to be friends. You're my employee, and you're going to drive me around, and we're not going to talk anymore. But if every scene, whether it's a little dialogue scene, obviously a big action scene, something else, if you think of how to tell the story without words, you're in good shape. And it's visual characterization, and the more you can do with that, the better.
Wait a minute.
It's very interesting to me that you cited in your favourite movies. One of the ones that you cited was French Connection. Of course, the interesting thing with French Connection is it's a fairly famous case of a movie that won several Oscars, but is very disputed as to who actually wrote what is said on screen. There is a screenplay, and there is what is said on screen. The director has famously said, "Yeah, we threw the whole screenplay out. We made it." It's interesting that you, as I know you're a filmmaker rather than a screenwriter, but how do you take to that kind of story? Because obviously, you talked about writers and directors not being at loggerheads, but that seemed to me to be a classic case in which there is disputed ownership of the words.
And I think that's always, it's like the big speech in Jaws that Robert Shaw makes. Robert Shaw says he wrote it the night before. John Milius says he wrote it. Gottlieb, who wrote the screenplay, says he wrote it. It's not in the book. No one knows who wrote it. But it's a great speech. So it's someone wrote it. But anyways, sometimes directors, one reason that some directors go through a lot of writers is because it's how they claim ownership of it. Because they supervise this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy and this guy, and then so therefore they can claim the script that way.
Right.
And it's usually ungenerous thing to do. But the reason I probably picked that movie from a writing standpoint is the car chase. And I don't think the screenwriter sat down and could come up with words that translated into the excitement of that car chase. But the car chase in that movie is technically it's good, but it's not the greatest car chase ever. Anyone can mount a camera outside the car and watch the hubcap fly off. And the car chase in that movie is great because of the character. To me, is because Popeye Doyle, if he hits the woman with the baby carriage, he's not stopping. That's why it's a great car chase, because you're scared of him as a driver, and he's chasing a train that's up there. There's no one else on the road with him, and it's his character and the way it's developed and the way he develops it that makes that a great car chase, because he's going to do anything to get this guy, and he doesn't care who gets hurt. The first thing he does is he leaves someone who was shot instead of him. He just leaves them on the side of the road and gets in his car and goes, because he doesn't care. No one's favorite movie is anyone else's favorite movie, and that's the beauty of them. For no reason, these are my top 10 favorite films. From Russia with Love, The Outlaw Josie Wales, The French Connection, Klute, where Jane Fonda talks the entire movie. Donald Sutherland says nothing. And at the end of the movie, you know everything about him and nothing about her, which is how it's designed. It's fantastic. The Bad News Bears, The Great Escape, The Road Warrior, The Guns of Navarone, and Manhattan, which leaves behind one. Lucas Jackson is alive to me. He is the only man whose approval I have ever craved. I measure my life against his and continually come up short. And he's a movie character. So Lucas Jackson is the title character in Cool Hand Luke, which I have watched a dozen times, but watched clips of on television hundreds of times. I don't know how many times. It is, in my opinion, the highest achievement in the history of Western civilization. And I'm not joking.
Sorry, Luke. I'm just doing my job. You gotta appreciate that.
Nah. Calling it your job don't make it right, boss.
It's a tricky thing with a movie because you can have a great script and a great director and everyone's heart can be in the right place. And you still need to get massively lucky to pull it all off, because so many things can go wrong, and so many, a movie is kind of 10,000 decisions that become one enormous decision. And if you get a couple of hundred of them wrong, it's only ever going to be good. You know, it's never going to be great. So I think it's very hard to pull off a really good or great film. So.